Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. I hope you enjoy listening to books. In this segment, I'll be interpreting the book, Finite and Infinite Games, A Vision of Life as Play and Possibility, by James Carse, an American philosopher. Carse perceives all human activities as a series of games. There are finite games, activities with specific endings such as playing chess or arguing with someone, and infinite games like marriage, culture, religion, and life itself, which persist with numerous possibilities and outcomes. The distinction between finite and infinite games lies in their purposes. Finite games aim for a win, while infinite games seek continuation. This concept profoundly addresses a crucial human question: how one should live their life. According to Carse, life, as an infinite game, holds the highest value. The pursuit of continuity in life becomes evident when we extend our perspective beyond the boundaries of life and death. While finite games offer transient experiences, the true value in life arises from those elements that endure continuously. For instance, in a marriage, focusing on winning arguments neglects the essence of an infinite game where both parties should aim for a better continuation of the relationship, ultimately seeking happiness. The applicability of these concepts spans broadly across human activities. They provide a framework to understand various aspects of life, revealing emotions and sentiments that were previously ineffable. However, interpreting this book presents its greatest challenge. Much like the saying, "a thousand Hamlets in a thousand people's eyes," this philosophical masterpiece can be interpreted in countless directions by different individuals. Carse's writing style, akin to religious texts with concise sections, compresses essential themes into brief fragments, leaving room for extensive contemplation. In less than 200 pages divided into 101 sections, Carse traverses essential themes like the world, time, society, culture, power, language, sexuality, disease, death, war, nature, machines, religion, and mythology. This approach, while condensed and somewhat cryptic, allows for expansive interpretation. Carse himself acknowledges theory as an explanation confined within finite games, closing off other possibilities. Thus, despite being a broad theoretical work, this book lacks a precise system or rigorous argumentation. It flows like a stream of consciousness. This enigmatic book offers cognition without answers. My aim is to extract the essence and main content of the original book while hoping this interpretation serves you well. Next, I'll delve into 3 topics to provide a detailed analysis. 1. Conceptually distinguishing finite and infinite games. 2. Re-examining society as the most crucial finite game and culture as the paramount infinite game through the lens of finite and infinite games. 3. Reflecting on how to perceive and approach one's life using the perspective of finite and infinite games. Let's dive into the first topic. From our earlier discussion, you learned the key distinction between finite games aiming for a win and infinite games seeking continuity. Now, what are the fundamental natures of these two games? Finite games play within boundaries, while infinite games play with boundaries, exploring and altering the boundaries themselves. Death stands as an unchangeable boundary, making other boundaries comparatively less significant. This summarizes the essence of these two games, having boundaries and being boundaryless. So, what are the boundaries in finite games, and how does the infinite game expand boundaries? Let's start with the 3 boundaries in finite games: temporal, personnel, and rule boundaries. The temporal boundary signifies that finite games exist within limited time and space. For instance, in World War II, agreements were made not to bomb certain universities, imposing boundaries even in warfare. Personnel boundaries hold 3 layers of meaning: participant types, numbers, and qualifications. Consider a football match: 11 players per team, referees, and countless spectators, setting limitations in types, numbers, and qualifications. Lastly, rule boundaries maintain the game's integrity. Altering rules mid-game disrupts determining winners and losers. Speaking of which, let me use a metaphor to sum up finite games. They're like transparent cubes, and we, the players, hop within these cubes. But who sets these boundaries, enclosing us within these cubes? The answer: ourselves. Carse emphasizes that all restrictions in finite games are self-imposed, limiting our freedom to engage in a particular finite game. But what freedom? The freedom beyond the game. Conversely, playing any finite game requires voluntary participation. Moving on from finite games, let's delve into interpreting infinite games. How does the infinite game expand boundaries? Simply put, it eliminates temporal and personnel boundaries while continuously modifying rules. Removing temporal and personnel boundaries is straightforward, so I'll focus on understanding the constant rule changes. In an infinite game aimed at continuation, when a potential winner emerges, altering the rules eliminates the concept of winning. Take language as an example. Debating and chatting both involve language, but debating is a finite game aiming for victory while chatting aims for continued interaction and exchange of information, necessitating frequent topic shifts and changes in tone. In summary, if I liken finite games to individual cubes confining us, infinite games represent an amalgamation of numerous cubes. As the volume of these cubes is vast, as individuals, we perceive only one boundary, death. Now, I need to explain the contradiction between finite and infinite games, a paradox inherent in infinite games. Finite games seem to be time-bound tasks, yet when we engage in them, we assume we'll live forever. In contrast, infinite games have no boundaries, yet we participate in them with the certainty of eventual death. It might sound convoluted, but it's understandable. In the case of infinite games, death is the sole boundary, making our lives a progress bar from birth to death. This clarity allows us to engage in a game without rigid goals or tasks. As Kars puts it, participants in infinite games play with mortal bodies. Or alternatively, we live towards death, life is a journey toward demise. Conversely, participants in finite games, less sensitive to death or without elongating the time dimension, become sensitive to immediate experiences and victories. To sum up the first topic briefly, the greatest difference between finite and infinite games lies in their objectives. Finite games aim for victory, while infinite games seek continuity. The essence of finite versus infinite is about boundaries. Finite game participants voluntarily set numerous boundaries within limited time dimensions, sacrificing some of their freedom. Infinite game participants extend the time dimension throughout their lives, living with the awareness of death, continuing various infinite games to achieve fundamental freedom. Speaking about the conceptual differences between finite and infinite games, our focus has largely been on individuals. Now, let's broaden the perspective and look at the world. Kars discovered that society is a vast and significant finite game, while the struggle within society is an infinite game called culture. After the previous discussion, you might wonder, what do we gain after winning a finite game? The answer lies in titles or rewards, which represent power. British philosopher Russell, in his work The Power, posited that the driving force behind social development and change is the pursuit of power. Throughout history, a small group or certain social organizations constantly gain power and then use it to dominate others worldwide. Referring back to Kars's words, citizens in society are precisely defined, territory is sacred and inviolable, and history is revered. Hence, society represents a finite game, with the aim of acquiring titles and seizing power. Winning a game requires an opponent, continual self-improvement to surpass them, preventing defeat post-victory, and defending one's title. Societal methods to gain titles and seize power are similar. Societies need to surpass other societies in a higher-level finite game, namely, warfare. Be it military conflicts like World War I, World War II, or recent trade wars between nations like China and the US, these are contests between societies engaging in finite games. Secondly, societies need to continually enhance their strength to win in wars. How? Establishing a set of rules and mechanisms to incentivize the pursuit of power by individuals, specifically, through fair distribution based on labor and property protection. Imagine if each person played different finite games, the titles and power gained would vary. So, how do societies measure who has more power? Societies need a universal finite game, commonly seen as the game of acquiring property through labor. In this process, abstract titles become visible, one's power becomes clear by comparing wealth. Societies establish a bureaucratic system to maintain the rules of this finite game, record each person's property, and enforce order through mandatory means, leading to the emergence of laws. Now, how can one prove having more wealth than others? Essentially, how can one externalize power? Implementing this mechanism in operation is far more complex. It's a carefully designed structure that requires considerable effort from property owners to maintain. Property owners have two ways to externalize power. One is occupying space to stand out, for instance, purchasing vast real estate or enjoying freedom to move around society. Think of the ubiquitous Trump Towers or even in the virtual Marvel world, where Tony Stark flaunts his name on prominent buildings. The other way is by consuming to occupy time. As a leisure activity, consumption represents an idle, careless behavior. The wealthy utilize this behavior to distinguish themselves from the hardworking, showcasing their power. Lastly, to preserve their winner status and titles, societies commonly commemorate heroes. This informs people what qualities society rewards, motivating everyone to embody these traits. Conversely, when individuals, protected by society, become winners, they strive to maintain the existing societal rules, giving rise to patriotism. So, where does society originate? Surprisingly, it stems from culture, a summation of all human activities. According to Carse, inherently, people are free, fluid, and pursue change. Descartes also held a similar view, believing in the inherent freedom of every individual's soul. However, Carse differs from Descartes. He asserts that relationships between people create boundaries, hindering the pursuit of fundamental freedom. Descartes, following a mechanistic perspective, views the body as a machine following natural laws, contradicting the soul and thus preventing the pursuit of freedom. Returning to Carse, he considers culture an infinite game. Culture can create numerous possibilities and must innovate, break boundaries, and challenge rules. In Carse's words, the essence of culture is transgression. Here's where the contradiction emerges: society, a finite game, arises from the infinite game of culture. But society, to ensure its game rules remain intact, denies its creator, culture, and suppresses it. Suppressing culture occurs through two methods: violence or claiming ownership. Violence could mean initiating wars. You might question this, as we've just said wars are finite games between societies. Indeed, but waging war and winning aims fundamentally to restrict one's own culture. Post-war, cultural creators might face execution, exile, or they may become glorifiers of war, praising the society's heroes. Let's recap this section. Looking at a broader perspective, society represents a finite game aiming for victory to gain power. To increase its chances of winning, society establishes various mechanisms to ensure that citizens all play the same finite game. Aspects like politics, law, war, and property, all constituting common aspects of society, come into existence. However, society, stemming from the infinite game of culture, utilizes various methods internally to prevent its game rules from being disrupted by culture. Talking about this, there's actually a question left unanswered. As citizens existing within society, much of our lives are destined to be spent playing various finite games. It's a fact, schools award different degrees to individuals, urging them to continuously pursue higher education. Every professional field harbors a series of competitions striving for the next level. Does this mean we cannot engage in infinite games and only circle within finite games? Truthfully, no one has a definitive answer to this. I believe the more ideal and realistic stance is to approach finite games with the mindset of infinite games and discover life's possibilities. In Carse's words from the book, finite games have scripts while infinite games are legendary. What does this mean? As I mentioned earlier, participants in finite games aim for better outcomes, so during training, they extensively study opponents' strengths and weaknesses, preparing thoroughly by understanding all variables. When they enter the game, nothing surprises them. Every move the opponent makes seems predetermined, as if the game's outcome was already decided. The entire game appears staged for the audience. As long as an audience exists, participants strive to play their roles well and defend their titles. Living life according to a script brings two problems. First, we become the roles we play, not ourselves. Acting as per the script's nature, individuals conform to the role's expectations. For instance, a woman entering the role of a mother might speak and act in ways fitting the stereotype to prove herself as a good mother. Second, a scripted life contradicts our innate pursuit of freedom. Kars mentions that human birth itself is innovative and possesses legendary qualities. So how do we continually embody this legendary nature? The answer lies in becoming our own geniuses, expressing original speech, actions, or thoughts. When people engage in original dialogue and action, they trigger each other, evoking surprise. In such moments, our mindset is open, no longer fixated on winning but anticipating change due to surprise, ultimately achieving a broader view of life. So, what exactly is this broad view of life? Let me interpret it with a business example. There's been a long-standing misconception about business, likening it to a battlefield where the aim is to eliminate competitors. Yet, in recent years, many businesspeople and entrepreneurs have realized that truly great entrepreneurs don't focus on competitors, they focus on consumers. When the target is the competitor, the scope is limited. Say, even if the opponent is a $100 billion company, your scope is restricted within that $100 billion. But when the objective is to meet consumer needs, the scope can infinitely expand because consumer needs have no limitations and are ever-changing. Summing up the key points of this section. 1. Kars introduced the new concepts of finite and infinite games, helping us reinterpret all human activities. Most activities are finite games, bounded and aimed at winning. But some are infinite games, aiming to break boundaries and continue the game. 2. Society is an important finite game, with mechanisms like politics, law, and property, focusing citizens within finite games for gaining titles and seizing power. However, society originates from the infinite game of culture. The essence of culture is transgression, yet society, to maintain its game rules, suppresses culture in various ways. 3. Observing finite and infinite games offers us a new perspective on life. While engaging in various finite games, we can approach them with the mindset of infinite games. Finite games script life for us, but an open mindset, expecting surprise, ultimately yields a broad view of life. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you all for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with friends. Let's combine wisdom and practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future together. Thank you, and goodbye.